Welcome back to Parts Whisky, 1 Part Wisdom. Today's whisky is a very old, reliable, 10-year-old Glenmorangie. And as you can see, there's not a great deal left in the bottle. So, today's video is on backups. Good old, boring backups. And damn it, backups are vitally important to our day-to-day operations and our businesses, and yet people are still dropping the ball when it comes to protecting their data. So, firstly, disclaimer. While I do work for NTT Limited, these videos and all of the opinions expressed in them are my own, and while some may align with NTT, this video does not represent NTT in any way. Thank you. Now back to the video. I'm going to have a bit of a rant on this topic. This has been in the news a lot recently, and there are numerous examples where there have been people and organizations paying out huge amounts of money, staggering amounts of money, to recover their data. Data that should have been protected by backups that could have recovered when it was required. Obviously, this is not happening, or we would not be seeing this hitting the news as often as it is. And I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be, but I am. In this day and age, in the current global situation, we should know better. And businesses should know better. So, I really am talking about the importance of data protection. Data is the lifeblood of so many organizations, and it represents a huge amount of value to both them and their clients. So why is it so undervalued, and why are people unable to recover when they need to get their data back? And I'm talking about physical hardware loss, data corruption, malware, and bad actors deleting data. It's, across multiple things. So who's been caught out? Well, the big obvious one is Sony Pictures. They lost a staggering amount of data. They lost, impacted by their particular outage, something like 3,200 desktops. I had something like 837 servers were encrypted, and it cost them a staggering amount of money to recover. Another big one is a council over in the US called ECMC, and while they didn't pay a ransom, they did pay over $10 million to get their data back. And now, finally, and the reason for this video, is we have another organization that has found themselves in a bit of a pickle. Garmin. Yep, Garmin. The GPS people and the fitness tracker people that probably have a lot of, healthy type data on people who use their devices. They have allegedly paid about $10 million to get their data decrypted. And, okay, I fully accept that Garmin themselves did not pay, allegedly, the people who encrypted their data $10 million. My understanding is they paid an incident response group who was managing the incident, and they've paid for it. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It shouldn't be necessary, and it's a massive failing. I mean, it's just not acceptable. Backups are critical, and you need to understand a number of different aspects around your data, and you need to view your data through a business lens to understand the value of the data and any compliance requirements you have around that data. So I always ask, first question, where does your data live? Because it's not a simple answer. Our data doesn't just live on our servers anymore. It may have done so 10, 15 years ago, but our data now lives in a multitude of locations. Our data lives on phones. Our data lives on tablets. Our data lives on laptops and desktops. It's living with the current situation. It's living on personal laptops and personal desktops. Our data lives in the data center, our storage area networks and our network attached storage, as well as our software defined storage infrastructure. And in the more recent years, our data is also now moving out of our sphere of control, and it's moving into the big public cloud IaaS providers, so the Azures, the Google Clouds, the AWSs. IaaS virtual machines can hold a lot of our data up in the cloud. Those cloud providers also have their own file storage capabilities and database storage capabilities, data lake capabilities, data analytics capabilities, where our data may be living. There's also platform as a service providers who might be providing, for instance, a SQL database as a platform, or we might be engaging software as a service providers, and they might be holding our data. We have even less control over the software as a service providers because it sits off to the side, and unless you actually ask those software as a service providers, what backups do you have? What are your recovery points? What is your disaster recovery plans? Are any of these things certified? How do you know how your data is being protected in a software as a service provider's environment? You may not even know physically where it is, in what country it is. So do you have any data sovereignty issues? I don't know. Depends what data is in the cloud. You should understand that. So where does it live? Critically important. And the next question is, do you actually need to back it up? This is a really important question, and I hate the answer when I say to people, hey, why are you backing that up? And they say to me, oh, because that's what I always do. No. Just because that's what was always done is not a good enough answer. You need to understand the value of your data and whether you even need to back it up. There's a lot of data that's duplicated. There's a lot of data that is created and can be recreated on demand. That data may not need to be backed up. You also might have multiple environments coming from the same, that are accessing the same data, but it's been duplicated through multiple environments. As long as you've got one good source golden copy of that data, you can repopulate that out. In fact, a lot of that data probably came from one source to begin with. It may even get regenerated on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis as part of the utilization of that data and keeping that data fresh. And there's two metrics that are really important, and there are more, but I'm only going to talk about two because I don't want to talk forever. There's two metrics that are really important: your RPO metric and your RTO metric. You need to understand your recovery point objective. At what point in time is your data lost? So if you have an RPO of 4 hours, you've lost up to 4 hours worth of data. If you have an RPO of 24 hours, you may have lost anywhere between a few minutes and 24 hours worth of data. It just depends on when your backup cycle is. So you got to understand what your business can sustain with that recovery point. And then there's the recovery time objective, and that's how long it takes after a data loss has occurred. How long does it take your IT department or your service provider to recover that data and hand it back to you? You may have a really short RPO of, say, hourly, but it might still take 4 hours for that data to be recovered and handed back to the business in a usable state. So you have to understand what those RPOs and RTOs are. And there's other metrics, as I said, there's your maximum allowable outage times and stuff like that. All of these things are really important, and you should understand them. So the other critical thing that is sometimes overlooked is, where are you backing up your data to? A lot of the time, and historically, we would have a data center with our servers and storage, and we would back data up onto tape, and that tape would sit on a shelf, and then somebody would come and take that tape and they would take it off site, and you'd have some tapes that are being kept on site, and they just rotate around for your daily backups. you would then maybe have your some dailies, some weeklies, and some monthlies and yearlies taken off-site to a off-site storage provider. And that covered you. If you lost your data center through fire, flood, terrorism, or any other event, you could call up your tape provider and say, guys, I need those tapes back. And they could put them all into a nice pretty box and ship them back to you, and then you would have this big box of tapes with all your data on it. Probably takes you longer to order or to spec up, order, pay for, and have delivered, and then build, install, and configure the servers after you've lost your data center. But you've got your tapes and you've got your data. So what I'm saying is that your location of your data is really important. We used to have that handled by going offsite with tapes. Nowadays, you might be backing up data from your production storage array to a network attached storage array, and if that's in the same data center, you've got a risk there that if you lost that data center, you might lose both your production data and your backup data. So it's really important to understand your data locality for production data and backup data. And you might have production data, backup data, and then a copy of that backup data at another location, so that you have fast recovery times from your on-site data, but longer times from your off-site data. So if you're, say, using a Microsoft Azure platform, you might want to back that data up and have it backed up within Azure, but then replicated onto on-site, or replicated into another region of Azure, or maybe replicated to Google platform and have it stored there. So if anything happened to Azure as an entirety, you can still get your data back. So there's multiple ways that you can do it, but it's important to understand the whole life cycle of your data. And finally, the last thing that's really important is your data destruction policies. How long do you actually need to keep your data? Because the business isn't going to want to pay for all of your data to be kept forever. So you need to talk through with them. How long is this data viable for? How long are we legally required to keep it? How long are we contractually required to keep it? And how long is that just our business policy to keep it? And then actually keep it for that long. Don't accrue extra costs by storing data forever if you don't need to. In some cases, there are businesses out there that they have very strict data destruction policies, and after they've ticked the box to say we kept it for as long as we needed to, now we delete that data, because it's actually a liability to maintain the data for longer than it's actually needed. So that's also really important to understand. So there are so many companies out there that can actually provide you with a rock solid and capable backup product. I'm not even going to try and name them all. I will rattle off a few, but I'm not going to try and name them all. And there are even some open source capable products that are capable of backing up your data. Personally, I've probably got a top 3 that I would use, but what I tell people is go and look at your technology stack, have a look at your systems, have a look at where your data lives, have a look at your RPOs, your RTOs, and your data destruction requirements, and then use that information to determine what is the best backup product for you. There are products like Veeam, products like Commvault, products like Dell EMC's Data Protect Suite, there's Cohesity, Veritas, there's the IBM backup products. There's a huge amount out there. You can find a backup product that works for you and that does the job that you really need. And it really is important that you do this, because the last thing you want is to be the organization that has to stop production or has to contact the customers that you still know about and say to them, I'm sorry, we don't know what you ordered last week. We don't know what we were making for you. We don't know what we shipped, what we didn't ship. We don't know how much money you owe us because we lost our finance system. So, please tell us how much money we owe or you owe us. This is all absolutely critical, and it's why companies like Maersk and Sony and ECMC and Garmin will pay millions, tens of millions, and even hundreds of millions to recover their data, because it's that valuable. So let's wrap this up. Is your business data important to you? If so, are you comfortable with your backups? Are you sure? If you're not, then do something about it. You need to do something about it. If you'd like to give me a call and have a discussion around this, reach out to me, ping me a message, give me a call. I would be happy to talk through backups and backup technologies and what's required if you're uncertain. It really is something you just can't not have it. It's not acceptable in this day and age. Anyway, rant over. Thank you for joining me for another part of 2 Parts Whisky, 1 Part Wisdom. I hope you enjoyed the rant / video. Hope you all have a great evening.